Good afternoon, evening, morning, whatever time of day it is in your part of the world. Ladies, gentlemen, beings of all descriptions, welcome to the channel of Alan J. Fisher, writer, author, poet, illustrator, whatever you want to say. I'm glad to receive you today, and I'd just like to welcome you all and share the joy of my writing and everything with you. Now, first of all, I'd like to say that the poetry was a bit more popular than I thought. So maybe there'll be a bit more of that, but not just now. I'd like to save something special for you today, and I'm trying to decide on what to do. Maybe you should vote. I'm thinking the March of the Dragon's a good one, but I'm going to leave that for another day. I am going to read you something quite different and play around with my voices today. I'm actually going to read to you a story called First Flight, a Goblin Adventure. To give you the background for this is set during the stewardship of Lupernicus, and it is kind of very loosely based on the works of Leonardo da Vinci, bit of fantasy and some other stuff. So, let's begin. Artemisium 14, 1784, Empyraeum Age. The goblin licked his thin lips and wiggled from side to side on his chair, looking exactly like a teenager waiting to be admitted into the Tiagiarch's office for some serious infraction. A very ugly child, admittedly, but the similarity was uncanny otherwise. I am not going to do anything to you, Iouri, Lupernicus said softly, fighting to keep his face serious yet friendly simultaneously, quite the feat when he was struggling not to break into chuckles. I'm just asking the lead man, goblin, in charge as it were, what happened? Thought there was air up there, Iouri muttered, inspecting his fingernails, which was no task for the faint-hearted. Lupernicus smiled and tried to get uncomfortable in his own chair, which, though well made as everything inside the mountain was, had not been designed with his bulk in mind. Even in the shit on the dwarfs had given him, Lupernicus made this goblin look like a 3-year-old child. All right, I understand the poor... He consulted the open scroll in his lap. Skylark did not have a pleasant trip. We Buccaneer turned inside out, boss. Iouri's eyes veritably blazed and his face went a curious taupe like a begging your pardon, but I'd say you put a serious scattergram on her day. Raised her from a wee ball of fuzz, I did. He collapsed into his seat and began to sniff. Oh, gods, don't start crying. Lupernicus prayed silently. He had seen a goblin cry before and did not quickly forget the experience. As ugly as goblins are when they're normal, a crying goblin made most people's nightmare inventions seem tame. I'm sorry for your loss, he managed. Iouri flapped his long-fingered hand dismissively, and said nothing. He searched the strange sleeveless leather garment of many pockets which he wore about his skinny torso. Oh gosh, pages sticking together. Excuse me. Technical difficulties of the ancient kind. So the cosmos is, he checked the scroll again, both rather cold and airless. Yet, he glanced to check once more. Upon turning back towards Gaia, some ether which blankets and protects her causes things to get hot very quickly. Instead of a reply, Lupernicus received an almost comical pop as the goblin blew his nose and nodded. Froze the poor wee bugger solid on the way up and roasted her like a Christopher's choy on the way back down, aye? The poor fellow's voice was shaking and his ugly features threatened the onset of even greater ugliness. My wee doggy looked like the chip you forgot at the bottom of the oven for months, so she did. He wailed. And as a full goblin set of waterworks was released with a great wail, Lupernicus thanked him and left before he lost his lunch. The carriage was waiting for him in the dwarf's rather modest office. As visits from those such as Lupernicus, if not the steward himself, were more common here, he found a beautiful armchair of red leather stuffed with horsehair, already set out for him. With a deep sigh of unknotted muscles, he surrendered to its familiar embrace. Caterwauling like a wee snot bucket again, was he? The carrick asked, with a smile so broad that his abundant beard barely hid it. He started to arrange scrolls and various sets of what looked like incredibly detailed dwarf green prints on the desk. Och, He loved that wee doggy, so he did, bless his wee green heart. He nodded and poured the comfortable spot and a measure of which. The good stuff, not that poison the goblins made inside old fuel drums which blind even a Kausadar. Lupanikes accepted the cup and raised it before drinking. Slant, he toasted. He let the fine liquor warm his mouth, swilling it around and savouring the mossy flavour of it as it evaporated from his tongue. So what happened? The dwarf indicated a scroll with a thick finger, leaning forward. Lupanikes saw a sketch of Gaia, with concentric circles drawn around her, as well as some rather odd-looking symbols. You're familiar with Pythagoras, Eudorus, and Diodoros, I'm sure. I'm imagining, yeah? Lupanikes, who was known for devouring texts in Alexander's great library, and who had spent many a night under artificial light, immersed in obscure tracts, simply nodded. Turns out they were wrong. The dwarf rubbed his beard. Turns out there's a lot of nothing out there, a lot more of nothing out there than there is of anything. It's not as something that can be warmed up like the water or a bath or anything at all. He stared at the papers. We got it up there, though, Lupanikes said, trying to calm the dwarf. Leonardus Turvintus and Madava's group got that right. They did right enough. We're not faster than a crow with his arse on fire, the Carrick nodded slowly. Leonidas fella had a few ideas on the lack of air and coldness aspect of it. He said it came to him while he was studying the bees you gave him. Lupanikes smiled at this. The eccentric genius and polymath was well known for having 3 or 4 thoughts, at least that many, at once. Go on. The dwarf slid a parchment covered in crabbed handwriting over towards him. It was full of little sketches, including several of bees. In fact, he had to restrain himself from trying to brush one of them for the page, so realistic it was. He studied it for a moment, taking time to turn Leonidas' letters the right way around in his mind. He looked up and met the dwarf's hazel eyes. He looked down again at the mess of a brilliant mind, running his fingers through his hair, before looking back at the dwarf. No way. The Carrick took a sip of his witch and split his beard with a massive grin. I've had Wally, Benny and Polly look over it, and they say the Mathematica is flawless. That's hardly a surprise. Lupanikes finished his own drink and grimaced as he took too much. Gah! He spat. Leonidas practically invented the current system. Leonidas practically invented our current system of Mathematica while he was in the bath cleaning his toenails. He ran his finger over the page and tapped at the part that was bothering him. Well, bothering him more than the rest of it. I believe the words you are looking for are bomb and suicidal, the Carrick supplied helpfully. Our blubbering friend Iouri has volunteered to pilot this. He says he wants no more freeze-roasted dogs on his conscience. Lupanikes blinked to that. Iouri the goblin, first being in space. What's this part here? He tapped the page. Says bathymetric bathing suit. The dwarf leaned forward and ran his finger over the drawing. It showed a strangely dressed figure in what looked like a large metal sphere on his head. Tubes and pipes of all kinds connected to the main suit itself. That figure also carried a large bellows-type arrangement in one hand. Your friend, the loony, says he invented this so as people could get shellfish in larger quantities faster. Says he got the squits from eating some bad mussels and did it, to distract himself from the consequences, as he was suffering from a strong bout thereof, as it were. Lupanikes wrinkled his nose and subconsciously wiped his hands on his shit-on. Can Mithril do that? He asked in absolute surprise. The dwarf just nodded, drinking slowly. It can change, depending on whether it is hot or if it is cold. Aye, it can. We'd not have figured it out were it not for that wee accident that cost Snorri's hand. Lupanikes stared at the page until it began to blur, speaking his thoughts out loud without realizing he was doing it. Can't breathe underwater. Can't breathe in the cosmos. Too cold deeper underwater. Too cold in the cosmos. Steam into water when too cold. Water into steam when too hot. Hot evaporates the cool. We're going to need a bigger ship. Thank you. And that's actually the the teaser version, the full long version that is out there somewhere. But I'm not going to give it to you just yet. Because I don't want to. You want to read some more? Bloody fine. We shall... Which one shall we read? Which one do you fancy, lads, or ladies, and gentle beings of all descriptions? I've got quite a few. Let's go for quite a different one. I know you guys like Sean Ollimur, so let's read his story. My name is Sean Ollimur, APH 61125LGR5AF. Hoplite Alexander's glorious new Empyrean army. Soon may he return. I feel like a gamming coracoon of a man right now. But know that I'm a rigger for life, for short and terrifying though that life is like to be. I was born as man usually is to his mother and father many years ago. Do I have to start like this? I feel like an Egypt so. Okay, but I sound like a right lamb. Fine. Here we go, sorry. I was born hundreds of feet beneath the surface of the moon. In a city or complex, very few people outside of us that has lives there even knows about. Big secret, you see, apparently. The hedge himself gave the order of silence to my great-granddad, Navak Seamus Ollimur himself. So he was to hide down there and prepare for his return, right before he nicked the crown. It was. Of course, a big hedge like Alexander cannot nick the crown, what with it being his ship and all, but it sounds more dramatic and story-like when told like that, doesn't it? So, I worked hard, always seeking the shades, seeing the shades of me mothers and fathers before me, urging me on to continue the tradition of service. I earned me black iron helmet, me uniform and blessed dusty thorax, with the eye of Alexander and the Virgina sun on its breast. You watch. I'm a hoplite now, but I'll be epibator or a harpy pilot in no time flat. I've me trusty Uranus on me arm, me knife upon me back, me pistol on me hip, me black iron upon me head so proud, ora, 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 och the army. I was so long, it was a long and hard slog to earn me arm plates of blue and red, with a beautiful golden Gaia set into them. I was shaking with pride as I nailed in the dust so as Sergeant Gwydion could reach and set them on me. He looked me in the eye then, seeing as he could owing to my recumbent position, and said to me, Ollie, I want you for a trip down to Gaia, lad. Being a Gila as you are, it'll be a slog and a half, make no mistake. Got it in you reckon? I told him I'll take a crack at it sure enough. And he said back to me quietly, no crack in your patch, you wee militant, you smash it or I smash you, see. So I told him I could do that as well. I could see we were having a grand relationship, old Sarge and I. He did not lie, I'll tell you that for a drachma. Old Sarge, he introduced me and 6 of me gauges to what he called the Gil Rig's rig, which 'twas no more than an old cargo lifter cage twisted to fit over one's shoulders, a harness welded on, and weight snapped onto it, as if you were a healer of Aquarius on a big job for a thirsty party. I swear to you now that Kunakop thing weighed more than I do myself. I was in full kit and all, sweating cobs with me legs all a-trembling, but at least I was not alone, for me gauges they were suffering too. All while that smug Taft Tim laughed and smiled at our disarray. I'm sorry, Sarge, but at that moment, you were a bastard Cumri Kuna Melaton in all my heart, sir. And, sir, I was not alone in my sentiments. We the seven of us felt like we were sinking into the dust that clung to our armour like a drunk does to a wall. On Gaia, you told us, a grin all across that ugly burnt head of yours, the gravity is 3 times what you have here. You who was born here will break your legs the first time you try and run, see? You then demonstrate by taking one of those light leaps into the air like tourists like to. Flying like the fairy that you are. Low gravity, under mineralization of the skeleton, low muscle density, extreme height. You know the story. Look you. Those who can complete The course I will be taking you to now will have, after a week or two, gained enough bone and muscle mass to survive tying your boots, and may even serve as soldiers instead of little curracon whingers, right? May a more Todd suss you up in the geed, we all thought. Sarge, yes, Sarge, we said aloud. After a week, 'twas just me, O'Connor, Owen and Parry left from the 7. After 2 was only I left over. Gobber and Shaw were in the medics with torn muscles, Bandsawn and Sugar had espied themselves off home. The other 3 had just vanished like whiz in the presence of a goblin. 'Twas only I remaining. I felt knackered and done in, but there was a sumph shiny feeling to that. I felt like the chalk of the coat, the chic ashul. I could lift the rig's rig in both hands and toss it away like it was nothing. With the rig off I was mooching all smooth and verily flew to me ked that night. Next morning the Sarge was there. Till now he'd worn tan fatigues to training, but today he was in his full armour of royal and gold, fine crested helmet in a crook of one arm, knife on his back and liguriori holstered at his hip. He had a pack, my pack, at his feet, and a lazy smile on them charred lips of his. Believe it or not, it took me 2 full minutes to spot the converted Stymphalian transport with its ramp down behind him. No time for Slamvala, Sean, he told me, the smile all gone. Shy, we got a click in the nest, so secrecy is our best friend. I lifted me bag from his feet and climbed the ramp without a word. To say we flew into a scattergram of the highest order is an understatement. Our trip past the majesty of the ring docks was a thing of beauty, though I felt a pull like none other once we left my home behind. The green and blue jewel of Gaia growing on the screens as the dusty grey of home receded. 2 Navy pilots in their black elephant helmets sat silent in the cockpit with their backs to us, only their armoured hands moving now and then. The interior lights were off and the silence was uncanny. Just the click of impact armoured fingers from the cockpit now and then, and the hiss of static as they surely spoke on a closed phono channel amongst themselves. The Sarge had his helmet on and had me don me mask and seal it on good as we took off. The tick of me breathing, my only companion for what felt like yonks. But they were surely no longer than minutes. Me phono lit up with the Sarge's voice. 4 minutes, 4 minutes to insertion, he said without emotion. I hope you're all ready. It did near scare me out of my skin when 6 suits of epibatoi armour I had not even noticed raise a thumb each in salute at the very same moment. They were locked into grab couches, something perhaps I should consider doing also. I saw now that they were all armed as the Sarge was, except one who was smaller in frame than the rest and had a small pistol on the hip. A massive rifler was locked to the bulkhead beside the chair. And with a thrill of fear I realised it could only be the dreaded Persephone herself, the best sniper in the whole gammon Empyraeum, and stolen coal killer from afar. The enamoured skull and with a crosshair on its forehead set onto her nearest shoulder guard confirmed this was none other than Lady Death her very self. I felt me thigh lacus tighten as I realised that this was if this was serious enough to have so many Eps and Lady Death along for the ride, we were about to drop right into the cack. Moments later, it seemed one of the pilots read me mind over the phone. Atmosphere in 3, 2, 1, he began. Going in hot and weapons free. Hold on tight, boys and girls, we're burning our way in. I felt the whole airframe vibrate then, with the dull kurr, kurr, kurr of what could only be the whole mounted Uranus cannons kicking off plasma into some orbital defences. I imagined I could hear their throaty roar over the increased pitch of the atmospheric engines, but over that banshee's howl I could barely hear my own hammering heart. As a Stymphalian jinxed, wove and jerked, I found myself dumped into one of the spare couches, next to an Ep who was surely pissing themselves with laughter inside of that smug helmet of theirs. Taking a few to steady my breath, I pulled the crash harness down and locked it, only releasing said breath when I was locked in tight. The Stymphalian continued to bounce like a cat in a sack, But at least I was in a position to be identified when my charred corpse was finally recovered. Enough wood remain melted this lovely chair. I heard the engines change in pitch, and felt through the soles of my boots the rhythmic cam of the Chimera Carmines over the forward swept wings firing. That meant we was firing at something on the ground. Heavy resistance in the LZ. I was sure this pilot was a gaming cyber. He was that good. Ground support incoming, but be ready to drop and pop. You heard the man, Sarge spoke up. Get them ready. 6 clicks of static sounded in reply. He looked my way with the sapphire eyes of his helm. I didn't trust myself to give him the traditional thumbs up. So badly was my hand shaking. I gripped the stock of my slung Uranus carbine firm-like, hoping that doing so would disguise my absolute bladder-squeezing terror. I licked drying, grummy lips within my mask, which thankfully hid my terrified eyes. I nodded with a confidence I did not feel. Tharos printhanatos, he intoned the motto of the epibatoi, his head bowed. On bus, on bus, on bus. 6 voices chanted back, thumping their chests in time with the words, to death, to death, to death. I added the words inside my own head. This was it. What followed took quite a while to reconstruct later on. I was just glad there was a later on to put it together in, because as soon as that Stymphalion hit hover and the ramp clanged down on the ruined London street, fire hit us from all directions. I could see nothing but flashes of light, dust, and the vague outlines of what looked like helmeted people, with a half cloak over one shoulder. I could hear chaos. My ability to distinguish one sound from another was overwhelmed, and I could do no more than run like hell, automatically staying as low as a big bugger such as I could, towards the royal and gold figures I believed were on my side, the cracker of laser weapons, the thunker of some large kinetic cannon, the growl bark of the Epibati Manticora pistols, the screeching whine following by a death of burr of a Gorgos rifle on full auto. Maybe I even heard the kurhodakam of my trusty Uranus rifle. I heard screams. I heard shouted orders. I heard. Of the actual fight, I remember little. I remember aiming my Uranus at anything resembling a dark helmeted figure. I remember kinetic rounds and energy shots kicking up dust all around me, spanging and sparking off our less than adequate cover. I remember hearing a scream dominate my phone as I poured every drop of terror into the discharges of my weapon. It took me a long time to realize that scream was mine. I remember flashes and flicks of adrenaline-soaked memory and strobe-lit madness. I remember thinking I was going to die any second. I remember a firm grip on my shoulder guard, dragging me back, urgent sounds filling my ears through the phone. Sounds I could not distinguish as words. With a scream that was equal parts bravado and terror, I lifted my rifle to smash my attacker in the face, only to see the ugly, dirt-streaked and slightly amused face of the Sarge, as he lifted a gloved hand to push my rifle butt away from his face gently. "We're done, boyo," he said gently. He'd lost his helmet at some point and dry blood covered one cheek. "We stop now." So I stopped, right into an undignified pile on the ground, my unconscious limbs still shaking like a cafad. When I awoke, I thought I must have died, because I opened my eyes to the face of the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. She had the most soulful eyes of greyish green, eyes that wouldn't be out of place in a goddess's head. Her having witnessed the foolishness of mankind for so long, so soulful and deeply sad they were. She had a sort of ragged dark red hair, and a pale-skinned, slightly pinched face that had seen too much strife and hardship. Yet she was beautiful still, and I felt all the terror of the past day drain away under her gaze. We were underground, it felt, dry like, and smelling of oil and old metal down here. The hospital I was in was well lit, was in a well lit area and under an arched barrel ceiling with images of dragons everywhere. On the filials of the Doric columns, cornices and rosettes on the ceiling, reliefs on the walls. Where we were, it felt... Where were we? I felt a jump in my chest at old memories presented an option, and one of the machines I was obviously wired up to blarted an electronic protest. The beautiful doctor lady gently pushed on my chest, as I tried to rise to my elbows to get a better look. I relented and focused on the really important view. He'll be fine, she said to someone much less important than her that I could not see. I didn't want to tear my eyes from hers now. They held me, pinned. First day nerves. Her thin full lips quirked its slight mouth. That's me, lad, I heard the sergeant growl almost proudly. Neura's right about you, Shawnee boy. I recommend a little bit more rest for him, the goddess said softly. Healers take a few days to acclimatise like you and I would at high altitude. You know best, Cat, the sergeant begrudged. You know you took down 7 of them Keeper Chartons, lad. 7! Not bad for your first time out. Not gammon bad at all. There was a kind of avuncular pride in his voice now, a hint of laughter too. I thought you'd SB out a cold a lot faster, but you were one of the Nemesis' own furies out there. He patted my arm awkwardly. Well done, lad. Well done. I could feel my eyes getting heavy and closing of their own accord. Sarge and the goddess Cat continued talking, though their voices were fading out on me now, weaving themselves into my approaching dreams. Let him sleep, Gwyn, you big softy, I heard her say with a low laughter. And get some rest yourself, you look even worse than you normally. Lass, you should have seen it out. He sounded tired, voice dragging. We barely got into the tube alive. They were everywhere. You got them out, Gwyn, you always do. Dragging that big lem as well, he managed with a chuckle. It'll be right, that one. Heart of gold stolen from a gammon lion. I barely stifled yawn. You push yourself too hard, Gwyn. You should have waited for Sunga and the scouts to get back. Her tone was heavily reproachful. He ignored the barb. How is old Percy? What was he doing out there? Clearing out what he could from what those people left in Mavman. She sighed. It was quite interesting how she could make normal words sound like curses without resorting to cursing language. You're lucky you saw that ambush and called it in, Gwyn. You're taking too many risks. If we stop, your flickering flame of Panastas will go out. He sighed even more deeply. The Lady Akata keeps them inspired and hoping you do. But I keep them alive. His voice sounded even more tired than I felt. I shuddered to think what would happen if anyone ever found the nest like they did at Mavman. We barely got you out of there alive. You'd be no good to us dead, or halfway there, Gwyn. She wasn't letting this go. I'm bringing down as many as I can. This Tev here, pretending to be asleep, was the only 1 out of 7 that made it. Maybe the cow should have. It was painful to hear the burning hope the burning hope in her voice. Oh, come on, Cat, he sounded angry, voice rising. They're not coming back. That I could do with a couple of those more Durlane right now. Maybe they were never even. A sharp, meaty sound cut him off. I was almost too far gone to be amused, but not far enough yet, unfortunately. I hoped the Sarge couldn't see my smirk. She slapped him, and quite hard too. Gwydion ab Nuth. No, sorry. You, Gwydion ab Nuth, need to stop speaking like that. She sounded like a teacher. Or a mother scolding a wayward child. It was odd, though. To say that your true birth accent comes out when you're either drunk or angry, and hers did now. It was a strange sing-song liquid accent like none I'd heard before, one that sounded almost new to Easy. We need you as much if not more than we need me. These young men and women need you. If word gets out that you are losing hope and talking such silliness. She let it hang there, all pregnant and menacing. I dared not open my eyes, but from the sound of his breathing, it sounded as if he was fighting back tears. I deserve that, you. He laughed raggedly. I'm sorry. The lady sniffed, but sounded like she had taken his apology in good grace. You need to watch that one. She tapped my chest again. He's too bloody clever. Oh, the reason I chose him, you. Listen. I don't know about you, but I need a drink. Let's get out of this Tev's sneaky earshot. I'm paying. Lights went out and I was left alone. I started to mull over all that I'd heard in my head, but sleep stole over me much faster than I imagined it could. I fell into a deep, healing sleep to the ticking and wheezing sounds of unknown machinery. Thank you. Now, I need a bit more practice reading in public, as it were, but I hope you enjoyed and will enjoy the written version of that. Maybe one day I'll either hire professional actors or become a professional actor myself, you tell me. But that's the readings for today. I hope you've enjoyed them. Remember always to visit www.alanjfisher.co.uk, www.empyraeum.com, www.thechroniclesofenoch.com, or chroniclesofenoch.com. God, I'm terrible today. Anyway, enjoy. Thank you. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you for listening. Love you all as always. Have a great rest of your day.